We could transition and talk about the Pete PodSave interview, because I think this fits with this conversation and his response on some basic questions about where you stand on Israel and Palestine at this point. Like, if you're John Fetterman or you're Richie Torres and you're just like, I'm the AIPAC guy and I'm all about that life and I'm going to cape for Israel no matter what, and I'm going to make sure that money's coming in on my side. Okay, I think it's disgusting. I think it's morally atrocious. I hope history judges you quite harshly for that. But I can at least understand a political logic to that. The one that is perplexing to me is the people who will go halfway. You know, they'll vote, for example, Bernie offered 2 amendments that you could vote, you know, for blocking offensive weapons. One of them was assault rifles and the other one was like bombs. You had some Democrats who would like vote for one and not the other. Right. What are you doing with that? The Israel lobby people, they're going to hate you. Like, AIPAC is not going to support you if you diverge even 1 inch. And people who see this correctly as a genocide being perpetrated with our tax dollars and are horrified by babies being starved to death are not going to be too impressed with you being like, well, you can't have the assault rifles, but you can have the bombs. Or this position that, you know, AOC and others have tried to lay out of, well, we're going to support the defensive weapons, but not the offensive weapons. People who are animated by this issue, which is increasingly, I think, a large driving factor within the Democratic base and completely one-sided at this point, as you're pointing out at the polls, in favor of, we have to stop this. Like, not only we have to stop funding this, like, we need to sanction Israel. We need a totally different approach to all of this. They're not going to be impressed with your like, well, the offensive weapons, no, but the defensive weapons, yes. And, well, I'm concerned, but maybe it's not a genocide. And actually, it's just Netanyahu. And if we could just get him out of there, you know, I don't know who that is. Like, who is that for? What is the, to put it the morality aside, like, what is the political benefit from trying to position yourself in this manner? And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's crazy to me that there's no obvious 2028 candidate for the Democrats who are just like occupying the Zoran lane of, I'm in favor of BDS. I am an avowed anti-Zionist. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I think it's a genocide. I think we should arrest Netanyahu if he comes to the country. It's mind-boggling to me, Ryan, that there is no one who is occupying that lane at this point.
Yeah, Khanna probably getting the closest to it. But yeah, you were referencing the Pete Buttigieg interview with PodSave yesterday, which actually Khanna dunked on him for. And Buttigieg was trending after this interview because it was so bad. So let's play, and we'll do a little trivia for viewers here. We'll play this clip, and you tell us what Pete Buttigieg thinks should be American policy towards Israel. This is B7. Sorry to be out of order here.
More than half of Senate Democrats just voted to oppose the sale of over $500 million worth of U.S. bombs and guns to Israel. Would you have voted to oppose sending those weapons?
I think we need to insist that if American taxpayer funding is going to weaponry that is going to Israel, that is not going to things that shock the conscience. And look, we see images every day that shock the conscience. So much of this is complicated. But what's not complicated is that if a child is starving because of a choice made by a government, that is unconscionable. And I think especially including voices who care about Israel, who believe in Israel's right to exist, who have stood with Israel in response to the unbelievable cruelty and terrorism of October 7th. I think there's a reason why so many of those voices are speaking up now too. Because this is not just something that is on its face and in itself a moral catastrophe. It is also a catastrophe for Israel for the long run.
How do you think the next administration should handle our relationship with Israel? Do you think it should change based on what Netanyahu has done the last several years?
Well, certainly Netanyahu can't be the only voice or the only compass for what should happen in the U.S.-Israel relationship. And, you know, no matter how strongly, or especially because of how strongly you might believe in Israel's right to exist and defend itself. You don't have to make excuses for the choices that Netanyahu is making, especially because they are often made not only in the name of the Israeli people, but in the name of a U.S. alliance. I think that we, as Israel's strongest ally and friend, you put your arm around your friend when there's something like this going on and talk about what we're prepared to do together. It certainly cannot be what we see right now from this administration and this president talking about beachfront property in Gaza before he's prepared to talk about human suffering in Gaza.
So the question started, hey, Kat. The question started with sending weapons to Israel. So trivia question, pop quiz. How does Buttigieg feel about weapons to Israel?
I mean, the truth is, I think we do know from the non-answer. I think if the answer was yes, we should block the weapons, we would have gotten that answer. The truth is, he understands, because Pete's not a stupid guy, as we all know. He understands where the Democratic base is and wants to sort of signal his empathy for that position without actually taking a position that would put him at odds with, where some of his donor base is. And you can only, when I ask the question, like, who is this for? In Pete's example, we know exactly who it's for. This is donor maintenance. That's what he's doing here. And he thinks, because he's a very slippery operator, that at this point, he can get away with sort of like restating the question and evincing empathy for the position without actually explaining where he is. And I hope what he and I hope everybody else is learning is that is not going to cut it. And there's so much about his answer, Ryan, that just disgusts me. First of all, Palestinians are being murdered every day, and we still have to center what's good for Israel. Can we just care that babies are being starved to death and that our government is complicit? Can we just care about the fact that, people are being massacred just trying to seek aid every day in the Gaza Strip? Is that okay? Or do I need to worry first and foremost about how Israelis are feeling about this and what this means for the future of Israel? I find that posture to be morally grotesque at this point. Second of all, and it ties into that, moral atrocity, in my opinion, is this idea that it's just Netanyahu who's the problem and he can't be the only voice here. Oh, really? Well, he's not the only voice. Every poll you look at says, you know what, Israeli society, they're on board with this. By and large, now there are some, how should we approach the hostages? There is some dissent, but by and large, do they care about what is being done to Palestinians? By and large, the answer is no. Not to mention, the people who are really driving the ship oftentimes in terms of Netanyahu and his coalition are the most psycho extremists, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. Not to mention the, so-called opposition figures who are supposedly more moderate say equally horrific and genocidal things. Like this idea that liberals love to hold on to that, it's just the fascist Netanyahu who's the problem. If we just got him out of there, then everything could revert to normal, is a lie. I mean, I can't even say it's a fantasy because I don't believe that he believes that. It's just a total and complete lie that he thinks allows him to maintain what is now a completely untenable position of thinking that liberalism and Zionism can coexist.
And to that point, in polls for the next Israeli government, of the top four, you got Netanyahu, and then the three below that. The three below are to Netanyahu's right. So this idea that like you're gonna, moderate that he doesn't represent the full spectrum is just not accurate. A bunch of things jumped out in that quote. One of them was this fear he has of naming Israel.
Right. All this passive language.
One of his quotes was, "If a child is starving because of a choice made by a government." A government. Which government?
Which government?
Which government is that? And I think I've seen you make this point, and I'm seeing normie Democrats who Gaza is not a top issue for them, making it also, which is that they want to see somebody good on this issue because they don't want children starved. But more importantly, they want somebody who has moral fiber, and they believe that this is a proxy, that if they're willing to stand up against the special interests that are pushing them to be bad on this issue, and they're still good on it, they're still willing to stand up, then that means they're going to be willing to stand up for democracy. They're going to be willing to stand up for people. Ta-Nehisi Coates had the great line that says, if you can't draw the line at genocide, why should I trust that you're actually going to stand up for democracy? And I think that
That's exactly right.
when people hear him say a child starving because of a choice made by a government, you sound scared. You sound weak. And no, we don't want scared and weak people now. And your point about restating the question is a good one too. And in the next clip, he does precisely that. I hadn't noticed that tick until you mentioned it. But here, let's play B7B, where he's asked about recognition of a Palestinian state.
Do you think it's time to recognize a Palestinian state?
I think that's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest problems that have happened with Israel's survival, or Israel's right to survival in the diplomatic scene. And many of the people who have taken that step historically have done so for different reasons than what we see happening with European countries. I think we need to step back and we need to do whatever it takes to ensure that there is a real two-state solution and that no one, not even the likes of Netanyahu, can veto the international community's commitment to a two-state solution where you have Palestinians and Israelis living with safety, with security, with rights. I believe that can happen, but we have to actually show some commitment to it.
So that's a profound question. Yeah,
my Pete hatred is so vindicated.
Yes.
It's so vindicated. Yeah, it's a profound question that arouses a lot of the biggest questions, Ryan. That's what that is.
That's what that is.
Cool, thanks.
So Khanna, who has been floated as a 2028 candidate, did not appreciate that response. You can put up the next element. He says, I respect Pete, where he diverges from you there. He says, I respect Pete, but we need moral clarity, not status quo. Yes, John Favreau, Dems should have voted for the Sanders Amendment. So there's an answer to the question. Yes, Dems should join my letter recognizing a Palestinian state. Again, an answer to the question. Yes, Trump and Biden disastrously failed on Gaza, and we need a new human rights-centered vision. So if you believe that Khanna is testing the waters for 2028, his political sensibilities are sensing here that there is a lane here, that you can go after Trump and Biden here, and that you can stand up here, you can go after other Democrats, and that Democratic voters will be with you. Do you think I can't think of anybody else who's kind of dipped their toes in these waters who's being more clear than him, which is kind of disturbing.
Yeah. And, and I personally think Roe needs to go farther. I think he needs to acknowledge the international consensus that it's a genocide. So even with him, I think people, to your point, they don't want to see you tiptoeing around, right? They don't want to feel like they're getting Weasley slippery answers, which is what you get overwhelmingly with Pete. And Roe is miles better. Like, it's not even close. I think you're right. He is leading in terms of the candidates who are sort of positioning themselves for 2028 and his approach of this issue. It seems to have some understanding of the way that this is functioning as a moral litmus test, even above and beyond the horrors that we see with Gaza. But, it also, I think what is notable in particular about Roe's tweet is not just he directly answers the question. That's kind of nice. But then he says it's Trump and Biden. And I do think part of the reason that some Democrats are tying themselves into knots and not wanting to, take these votes or give direct answers or whatever is because they're implicated. And they don't want to say, you know what, they were right. Biden and Harris were complicit in a genocide. I mean, that's a tough pill for them to swallow. And then they have to go back and look at, well, what votes did I take during that time period? And what is my responsibility to make right for my own complicity here? And I think that is separate and apart from the money and the influence of that, which is obviously very, very real. I think there's also a lack of desire to look backwards, take accountability for one's actions, and critically to have responsibility for ending this going forward. Because if you say it's a genocide, then that would indicate, as someone who is in an elected position of power, you have a lot of responsibility, especially given our government support for that genocide, to go above and beyond the call of duty to try to end these horrors. And I think that many of these Democrats don't want that responsibility on their shoulders, that historic weight, because that's what it is, to rest on their shoulders.
And from a pure cynical political perspective, the numbers make it not difficult. I mentioned that 8% earlier. We can put up B9 here. Here's the tweet from Anel Shalin, who was one of the State Department resignees. She resigned in protest. So this is 32% of Americans approving of Israel's military actions. Among Democrats, the number is down to 8%, and among independents, the number is 25%. And when people who, among Republicans, it's 71%. If you look at young Republicans, it's way, way down. Among that 25% of independents, you're going to have a decent number of people who are older Republicans but call themselves independents. And pollsters understand this phenomenon. There's the same with Democrats. There's a portion of people who call themselves independents who operate just like partisan Democrats, and same with partisan Republicans. So true independents, the number is going to be much less than 25%. But among Democrats, 8%. 8% support. That is, politicians are always looking for 70-30 issues or 80-20 issues. It's rare they get a 92-8 issue where most of their opponents or their adversaries in the primary are with the 8%.
Yeah.
This is a chance to be with the 92.
Chance of a lifetime for someone.
There's such a thing as political gravity that is going to bring this all down at some point.
I feel like that. I do feel like that. And, there's a kind of a beltway conventional wisdom that, foreign policy doesn't really matter. People don't vote based on foreign policy. I don't really know how you live through the fallout from the Iraq War and continue to hold that view, let alone, prior to our time, the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And still feel, people don't really care about foreign policy. Because not only is it important in terms of, international stability and young men in particular being sent off to fight and die in these wars by, mostly rich people sitting in Washington, D.C., but it does speak to these larger moral questions. And on the Democratic side, it really exposes the hypocrisy about a party that tries to position itself as the champion of democracy and liberal human rights, that you're still standing in lockstep with this rogue nation committing genocide and, bombarding all of its neighbors in this hyper-aggressive fashion that we're actively, supporting and participating in. And on the Republican side, it really exposes the hypocrisy of the idea that administration would be America first and that American interests would be the priority first and foremost. So, and in both instances, it really serves as a litmus test for who is willing to have a shred of integrity or stand on principle, even when there is organized money and other, social and cultural interests that are aligned against you. And, so far, the overwhelming number of politicians in both parties at this point are failing that test.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.